Um, as you ask yourself the question, what is harassment? It's simply this: behavior which has the effect of humiliating, intimidating, or coercing someone through personal attack. It can also be behavior that can cause the recipient to be embarrassed, uncomfortable, and cause emotional distress. As teachers, I'd like to, and educators and administrators, there's an important point to be made here, and that is this: we are leaders in the community. We're held to a higher standard, and we have to meet that standard. So all of the things that we're talking about today, you need to emphasize them as being somewhat more applicable, a higher standard, and something to work toward, because you just don't want to be on the news the next day for some dumb comment or remark or an intimidating comment that was made to the opposite sex. So let's talk about the definition of illegal harassment. The definition of illegal harassment is unwelcome conduct which is taken because of a protected personal characteristic and which creates an abusive job environment. There are 3 requirements for that to occur: unwelcome conduct because of the protected characteristic, and a hostile, abusive environment. Types of abuse are in roughly 2 main categories: quid pro quo and hostile environment. The first that we see in the news a lot is the person that's in a position of authority or power who asserts that power in a sexual way, and when expectations or decisions are based upon the granting or denial of sexual favors or willingness to submit to unwelcome behavior. This becomes fairly important to coaches, those administrators and supervisors that are involved in education. Principals in particular are looked very keenly and constantly analyzed and possibly even criticized for exerting too much authority. But when that authority crosses the line into sexual intimidation or an inference of that, then we've got issues. And at times we have had to deal with that. In particular, I can mention to you one case where a principal was just simply an outgoing personality who liked to have relationships with his direct reports, which consisted of the vice principal, people in the nursing area, and teachers. What he didn't know was that his friendliness and familiarity was not welcome to one of his subordinates, and that person filed a complaint. So what you have to do is be very careful about how you come across to all, everyone, colleagues. There's another area that needs to be cautiously considered, and that is the relationship with parents. You know, we have a lot of after-hour events. We have innocent interaction between teacher and parent that can be misconstrued. So, as I said before, we're constantly being examined, constantly being considered for having the wrong intent when all you're trying to do is just get to know somebody. So let's go through some examples of quid pro quo. The first one would be demanding sexual favors in exchange for a promotion or a raise. That's pretty obvious. Demanding participation by a subordinate in a religious observance. That goes beyond the sexual area and goes into an area that is similar to sexual harassment, but pretty much the same behavior. Changing job performance expectations after a subordinate refuses repeated requests for a date. Disciplining or discharging an employee who ends a romantic relationship. Those are examples of quid pro quo. Now, hostile environment is kind of a legal term that has developed over the years. It's handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court, where the workplace itself becomes an environment that is repugnant or is not accepted by the person because of their gender. Better stated is on the slide here, where it says where verbal or nonverbal behavior in the workplace focuses on the sexuality of another person or occurs because of a person's gender or other protected characteristic. Where verbal or nonverbal behavior in the workplace is unwanted or welcome. Where verbal or nonverbal behavior is severe or pervasive enough to affect the person's work environment. Now, most of our school districts basically have policies about all of this, and they have that for a very good reason. First of all, if there is unwanted behavior and a hostile environment that is sexually charged or improper or just, basically constantly referring to one's gender or sexuality, they very well could file an EEOC complaint. That involves an investigation, and we certainly want to know that the school has a process for investigating such charges and that behavior so as to let the EEOC and the world know that they are very interested in maintaining a stable, effective working environment that is not based on gender or sexuality. As we look at the next slide, you see there, these are behaviors that can be unwelcome and or sexual in nature. A lot of this is common sense. Sometimes it is not. I've been in the business world for about 33 years, and I've seen innocent touching or hugging sometimes become the source of complaints. Looking at people funny, gesturing, grabbing, jokes, remarks, or comments are very commonly brought up in hostile environment accusations. Propositions for sexual activity are obvious. Dating, that is an area that's just fraught with peril, and everyone that works together is aware that that needs to be mutual and open and not necessarily oppressive or pushy. As humans are, they will interact and they will talk to each other, but when you put it into the context of dating, you need to be very careful that is in no way related to your job or what your expectations of that person are, and follow the guidelines that are outlined in your employee handbook. Obscene language is another one that I see a lot of. Inappropriate comments about a person's body. I've had comments about, very innocent comments about what somebody is wearing, innocently intended but taken the wrong way. So it's very important to realize that it's not what is said as much as how that may be received by the person who may come from a different background than you do. So cartoons, written documents, pin-up calendars, drawings, computer images, posters, objects, faxes, and emails. And all of these things have to apply to your students as well. There's no double standard there. You have to set the tone in your classroom. If you see anything going on with the students, stop it dead in the tracks, deal with it then, let them know that it's not tolerated. Same-sex sexual harassment, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that that is a form of sexual discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. You know, you may not be, you know, a gay person yourself. You may, but, you know, or you may be against same-sex marriage. You may make that opinion known, but I would suggest that you keep that to yourself in the school environment, and you really don't know, you know, especially students' sexual preference, and you certainly many times don't know your colleagues' sexual preference. So it's just not a topic that should come up. It shouldn't be dealt, you know, presented in a way that could cause you, you know, difficulty in explaining exactly why this person has reported you for improper behavior. Behavior that's not sexual harassment. Voluntary lunch or dinner dates. Asking a coworker to have lunch or dinner is harmless. We all have friends. We all have social experiences. We can't walk around like zombies, but making appropriate compliments, telling a person that his or her outfit is nice, acts of courtesy, opening the door for someone. Back to number 2, telling a person that his or her outfit is nice, that's fine by itself, but many times I've seen that connected with other improper behavior to show improper intent and discrimination. So just use good judgment as you give feedback to your coworkers on their attire. In order to be unwelcome, the conduct must be both actually offensive to the victim and not solicited, excuse me, or invited by the victim. If the conduct is welcome, then the conduct cannot be considered when deciding if there was an abusive environment. Now, that's a strict legal term and an analysis. It is not licensed to read a person as believing it's welcome behavior and doing what you want. That is just a very scientific, technical analysis that, if followed by the black letter law, would probably get you in trouble. So be careful with that explanation about unwelcomeness. Evidence of the conduct being unwelcome includes the victim told the harasser to stop, the victim moved away when the behavior occurred or looked away from the harasser, excuse me, get this. The victim met the joke with a prolonged stony silence. As you see evidence that the conduct was welcome, which I find, you know, again, be very careful with this as being a guidepost for doing anything you might want to do. The victim engaged in similar manner with a harasser just prior to the harassing statements. The victim initiated physical conduct with the alleged harasser, and the victim laughed after the supposedly harassing joke and remarked it was a good one. Now, again, just because this does not indicate unwelcomeness does not give you the green signal to proceed with improper behavior. In fact, this is what gets a lot of people in trouble, seeing these things and misconstruing them as welcome, and more importantly, misconstruing it as license to do more. And so be careful about being drawn into those kind of behavior habits. So, welcome or unwelcome, you have to be careful regardless of what these slides are intimating as far as the distinctions. If the victim does not complain or does not engage in body conduct outside the workplace and was heard to use curse words from time to time, that is no indication whatsoever. So I would avoid assuming anything from that. Abusiveness. The requirement of an abusive job environment is really broken down into three parts, or three dimensions, I should say. Subjectively abusive, the behavior is objectively abusive and is part of the job environment. A job environment is subjectively abusive if the complainant actually believes it is abusive. Evidence that the complainant has a subjective belief of abusiveness includes statements that they felt the environment was abusive. This could be corroborated by complainant seeking professional counseling. Complainant complained to other people about the environment, and a witness report that the complainant was very upset following incidences of harassment. So as you consider whether the behavior, whether it's you or someone else, is abusive, try to think in terms of subjective and objective measurements. An objective abusive environment is if a reasonable person would find the environment abusive. So the comparison that's drawn here is you may think you know what a person is feeling as you say something, but you could be totally wrong because of their culture, because of prior things that have happened in their life, or religious undertones or overtones, and just values and how they judge other people. So an objective abusive environment, again, is what a reasonable person would find in schools. So factors in deciding whether the school environment is objectively abusive include frequency, severity, physically threatening or humiliating, unreasonably interferes with job performance, and the effect on psychological well-being. Frequency and severity of the harassment are the most important factors. They add together to make how bad the environment is. If it is bad enough, it is abusive. As the severity goes up, the frequency needs to go down. Well, that's making it sound like the severity, as it goes up, the frequency needs to go down, and that's a good rule. That's just simply making the point that neither is good. It's just both should be considered as you conduct yourself as role models in the school, with your colleagues, with your superiors, and in the community. If you're in doubt about the appropriateness of particular behavior, consider the following. Would I behave this same way if my mother or child were standing next to me? I think that's probably a very good standard to keep in mind. When in doubt about the appropriateness of particular behavior, consider the following. Would I want my behavior to be the subject of a report on the evening news? Same thing with defamation and slander. Don't say things about people, or don't say things that you don't want to be on the evening news. Everybody's heard that statement. Well, that applies to your behavior in the classroom and in the education environment. It can be misconstrued, it can be analyzed, and it's up there forever for everybody to see. And in this day and age, once you say something, it can go many places. It can go on iPhones, it can go on social media, and suddenly you're labeled something that you never believed you were, but it's hard to prove you're not. Is it harassment? When in doubt about the appropriateness of particular behavior, consider also the following. Would I want to describe my behavior in court in front of a judge or jury? There's a little cartoon for you to take a look at. Your Honor, I object. This line of questioning is making my client look really bad. Being a lawyer, I can tell you that's the nightmare that we deal with in the courtroom. Looking bad sometimes is not the end-all to be-all, but it certainly is a factor regarding credibility, professionalism, and your ability to be promoted, your ability and aptitude and value as a co-employee is affected. What is your responsibility? Your responsibility is threefold. You need to understand, you need to know company policy, you need to adhere to it and the law, and be careful. Also, number two, be watchful, pay attention to coworkers, look for subtle forms of harassment, report any instances, and this is very important to maintain a sexually charged or harassment or hostile environment. Everyone has to respect each other, the procedures and the rules, and not only for yourself but for your students and for the reputation of the school that you represent. Be active. Confront harassers directly if you are comfortable doing so. If you're intimidated and not, then report it to someone else. Again, deal with this with the student if it happens. Deal with it quickly. If it's a colleague, deal with it with dispatch and directness and forthrightness, and look at it as your responsibility. Document all instances and detail, detail, detail. Be courteous. People are not likely to say that you've said anything off color or inappropriate if you're just pleasant. Someone that's sarcastic, caustic, and always trying to be funny risks the accusations that are forthcoming, and that is this person is inconsiderate, doesn't understand how it impacts other people with different sensibilities. So think. Don't bully people. Don't brittle people for sport. Try to avoid loaded words. Don't use the F word. Don't curse. Ask yourself in every instance, whether you're in an education teaching environment or a social situation, am I offending anyone? I may be a coach on the football field with my assistant coach saying something that I think is funny, but is that appropriate in front of your players, or is it appropriate in a faculty meeting? So be professional. Keep your personal life personal and your work life professional. That's a very good rule. Treat everyone with respect. Employee responsibilities in the public. Teachers who deal directly with customers, the public, or with personnel from other organizations, and this applies throughout our society, but particularly in our school systems where we're very visible, where we're in touch with parents, relatives of the students, and we are setting role examples. But you always need to ensure that your behavior is acceptable. So you don't have to tolerate unwelcome behavior yourself from anyone, but you must act responsibly when dealing with unwelcome conduct. It doesn't mean reciprocate. As to supervisors, the dues, take the situation seriously. If you're an assistant principal, a coach, or a leader of any type on a committee, whatever it might be, take the situation seriously, communicate with your colleagues and other teachers, act immediately to stop any improper behavior, maintain the confidentiality that's been brought to you, and use it in the proper way and through the chain of command as to correcting the improper behavior, and try to remain neutral as you investigate. Teachers and employees, try to resolve it at the lowest possible level whenever possible. That really depends on the severity and frequency and who is the person that's breaching the policies. Report to your supervisor, contact Human Resources for guidance and assistance, and document the actions. I would not underutilize the Human Resource Department. I find that most of situations, if reported early, can be dealt with much, much better and with more effectiveness if the HR individual is sought out early. We have in all of our Tennessee districts an anti-harassment policy, so I won't go through each individual one. I'm skipping around here. Hold on just a moment. I've lost my employer liability for acts of supervisors. As we know and as we talked about a few moments ago, the quid pro quo by administrators or supervisors creates liability for the district, and it creates liability for the governmental agency. You cannot raise affirmative defenses to avoid or limit that liability. When you're in a position of authority, it very much expands and increases your commitment and your accountability. In the hostile work environment, you can raise affirmative defenses to avoid or limit liability, but the key is not to put yourself in that situation. The employee liability, the acts of coworkers or non-employees are outlined there. If they knew or should have known of the misconduct, it creates employer liability unless you can show they took immediate and appropriate corrective actions. So that's very much the reason why we request that immediate action and corrective action be taken. As a review, as we look at the definition of sexual and genital harassment, be aware of the environment, the hostile work environment, the quid pro quo, the improper conduct that can generate unacceptable, unwelcomed behavior. The types of harassment are many. They can not only be sexual, they can be religious oriented, they can be, they can be insulting comments that just generate and move toward and help create a hostile work environment that none of us want. As far as liability, we just went through that. It can create very significant liability for the school system and for yourself. You can be brought in individually and as an agent for the school system. So it can make for a very difficult day and for a lengthy period of investigation and just a huge distraction to anyone's career and responsibility. So at this point, I'm going to kind of close down the PowerPoint, and we're open for questions at this time. So.
Yes, Mike, could you please address specifically if there are single educators, administrators, and also other single administrators, and how they deal with single parents and other single coworkers who are allowed, I guess, to date in a way, or if they wanted to, still how that works in a school setting.
Are you talking about single teachers,
Adults, right.
single adults and teachers and educators
And then sometimes
dealing
there's single parents too.
single parents? Yes. Yeah, I mean, all of us are familiar with either a parent and a teacher that have gotten to know each other, or teachers that have met. And all I can say is use good judgment. There should be no overt displays of affection. There should be a complete separation of personal and professional. You don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. You don't want to give the signs that something that is a little familiar in school between two people that may have gone to dinner the night before and are making familiar gestures and comments in the school environment the next day. You don't want to give the impression that that is proper. So I hope that answers the question.
Anybody in the audience, if you could type a question, we'll get it answered for you. What would you suggest a parent do if, a teacher or educator do if a parent is making unwelcome gestures to them?
Well, I think you need to probably handle that as close to the source of the problem as you can. I don't think it would be proper to overreact, but, and go running down the hall looking for somebody to talk to. It's all of our responsibility to draw boundaries of behavior, and I think a reasonable person can see the improper overtures, and I think it needs to be dealt with at the moment, walking away, discussing with the person that you're not interested. This is not how you handle yourself as a teaching professional, and just give every indication that this is inappropriate behavior. And there are always in the workplace and in schools people that are going to joke around and become familiar with each other and become friends. Again, there's nothing wrong with friendship. It's just that if it goes into the area of making sexual comments or coming on to people in an improper way, whether it be a parent, parents have responsibilities too to children and to the education environment to avoid any intimation of sexual overtures or harassment. So I think in those situations between teacher and parent, it's best handled at the grassroots level, but if it becomes frequent and oppressive, then I think it should go to probably the supervisory level and the HR level. Any other questions?
I don't see any questions. If anybody has any further questions, you can email me. I'm going to change the back to me.
Well, here.
Go ahead.
I saw a question as I was getting off, and that is a lot of what happens is after school when people are more informal and comfortable. How do you handle that? Again, just remind yourself that school functions are part of all of our jobs, and we're being, role models, and we need to not let our standards down while we're at a football game or at a dance or at an activity. So